But it's not just Kashi Mathura. Now there are so many. The lower courts admitted several.
So?
So it's going to be several of them, and now they can't.
Right.
Because there's a stay now.
That I agree. See, let's look at the biggest bogey that's constantly cited. Ek khula to kitne khulenge? You're opening the floodgates. Floodgates to what? Floodgates to what? Reclamation. And I don't understand the constant chest thumping about Hindutva and Bharat without having the courage to actually reclaim the spirit of Bharat. And I've said this before, that if the Supreme...
Aren't the mosques also spirit of Bharat?
I agree. But as long as they are not on occupied sites.
That is where the dispute occurs.
That is where the dispute occurs. So what are we saying? See, the Supreme Court itself, through its verdict of the Ayodhya case, on which I have certain disagreements, has shown the path. A party which has lost was given land by the Supreme Court when it doesn't deserve to be given land. You have enough property through Waqf property and you're anyway claiming more, the rest of Bharat also. You keep building there. It is possible to simply evolve a process of exchange, which, although is not necessary or required, you can do this in the interest of peace. But if you wish to retain an occupied site, knowing fully well that it has a seriously contentious history and history that goes against you, and you still hold on to it, how do you expect an awakened Bharat to respond to it when history is beginning to resurface? Pun intended.
How many places will you keep saying that this is occupied, that is occupied? How are you going to say it? Because what you said once is that there are 4,000 sites.
Actually, I said 40,000.
40,000.
That figure could have been exaggerated. But what did I say? We spoke of one wasn't acceptable. We spoke of 3, it wasn't acceptable. I said, then if negotiation has no room here, then why will I limit the scope of my claim? Mangna hai to sara mang lo abhi. What is the point?
Ki kuch to milega.
Exactly. And not just that. Kuch to milega is a different issue. At the very least, the history of each of these places needs to come out. People should know Ram Janmabhoomi was not isolated. People should know Kashi was not isolated. And people should know this was not exactly a northern-centric phenomenon. Across the board.
Tipu.
100%. Tipu and so many places. I think in Warangal, so many temples. Shaktipeethas are there. Therefore,
Kashmir.
What exactly? And Kashmir is also in the 90s, for God's sakes. Not just, you're not talking about the medieval ages. So what these proceedings do is to give you an opportunity to present evidence, which unfortunately haven't found their way into textbooks. It will generate a discourse. Hopefully it should trigger introspection. I have a slightly mixed position on the question of jati, but nevertheless, if the history of so-called caste and its, let's say, related behavior have constantly found reference in our public discourse and, let's say, in our textbooks and every other place, and there are policies to that particular effect which are trying to redress a certain grievance, tell me, why does the logic of that position change in the context of religion? Answer the question. The position is repair. It's reparative justice. It's not retributive justice, right? It is to ameliorate certain social, let's say, social behavioral patterns. Now, how much of it is based on, let's say, actual history? That's a different question altogether. But nevertheless, the Indian state seems to have taken that position for granted. Why does it want to take a different position in the context of inter-community relations when it doesn't have a problem taking that position in intra-community relations? So, divide the Hindu and deprive the Hindu of his opportunity to reclaim his sites as well? That can't be the strategy. So you constantly talk about jati, caste, reservation, keep us divided. And when it comes to the other side, secularism will prevail. Ye thodi ho sakta hai. Therefore, my position is very clear. The Indian state, by now, should have constituted a commission for truth, reclamation and reconciliation, which it has not had the courage of its conviction to do in all these years, even now. Do it. Set out a clear policy. Ask yourself, here's the simple thing. Before the farm laws were asked to be stayed or not implemented by the Supreme Court, the question that was put to the government was, did you speak with these parties, the affected parties? Did you undertake a wide-ranging consultation? Now, here's the question. Before the Places of Worship Act was brought into effect, I think in 1991, how many affected parties on both sides were consulted was a baseline study undertaken to find out how many such existing disputes are pending in courts or there are existing claims even outside of courts. As long as you've not done that study, it's a knee-jerk reaction. Now let's go to the next step. Why does Ram Janmabhoomi deserve an exceptional treatment through non-application of the Places of Worship Act, which exemption is not available either to Kashi, Mathura or any other temple? Isn't that discrimination according to the constitution? So
What did the court say then? Why was it special? Why was it different?
the court did not say anything to that effect. So here's what happened. And just pardon me here, I'm going to get slightly academic here, but I think it's important. We are being told constantly in public discourses and other places that the Ayodhya verdict itself has taken a position on the Places of Worship Act. And therefore, the challenge to this act is meaningless because apparently that judgment has given a stamp of approval to the act and its constitutionality. Okay? We are being told you can't challenge this because the Constitution bench has already said this is a perfectly constitutional act. Point number one. The constitutionality of the Places of Worship Act was never an issue in the Ram Janmabhoomi case.
Yeah, why?
Because the Act says, Section 5 says that this dispute is outside the purview of the application of this Act.
Yeah, because it was pre-1991.
Not just that. According to them, they have just said, see, that the reasons for it we don't know.
They said no, that it was already in court before the 1991.
Then what about, let's say, okay, the only fact of the matter is there was a pending litigation, so to speak, since 1858. But the fact of the matter is the provision says this is exempt, right? If the provision says that the Act exempts its application to this dispute, that means there is no reason to discuss the Act in the context of the dispute. So the law basically says, and this is from the Supreme Court, no finding of the court on an issue which is not an issue before it in a particular case is binding. मुद्दा आपके सामने खड़ा ही नहीं हुआ किसी, let's say, case में. Your observations in that regard are what we call obiter dicta, marginal observations, non-binding observations, no precedential value. Okay? So for whatever it's worth, those findings do not come in the way of a challenge because they are obiter dicta. Second, as far as the trigger for the discussion in the Ayodhya judgment itself, you'll be surprised at what has happened. 3 judges pass a verdict, a 2-1 verdict in Allahabad in favor of the temple side in the context of Ram Janmabhoomi. One of them, I think, is Justice Sharma. I think there are 2 Hindu judges. One is Justice Sharma, Justice Agarwal, and I think it's Justice Khan. So one of them so one of those judgments of the 3 judges becomes the trigger for the Supreme Court to take it up. Now, why does the Supreme Court take it up here? Supreme Court says, in the 3-judge verdict, the Places of Worship Act has been discussed by the lower court or by the Allahabad High Court. Therefore, we will have to decide or we'll have to adjudicate upon it. The single judge, or let's say the judge of the Allahabad High Court as part of the 3-judge bench, never discussed the Places of Worship Act at all. He was quoting a 95 judgment of the Supreme Court to say that it is possible to enforce rights under Article 25 through standard suits. And in that judgment, in the extracted portion, there was a reference to Places of Worship Act. That extraction is there in the Allahabad High Court judgment. The Supreme Court mistakes this extraction to be a finding of the judge of the Allahabad High Court, when in fact he was merely quoting it. There was no such issue for him to even decide on. And then for 10 pages, the Supreme Court discusses the Places of Worship Act, saying he has decided or he's returned a finding, so we too have to comment on this particular issue. It's actually based on a proper clerical error. Proper clerical. And I wrote an article to this effect in 2020, within 6 months of the judgment. And I wrote 2 pieces on my blog called Yukti, immediately after the judgment, saying there is a very glaring error here. There's no reason for this discussion to have taken place either legally or even factually. After I published this article in a particular portal, check out which portal this is, they asked me to stop writing. They asked me to stop writing. Until then, they were literally after me saying, एक column to लिख दो, हफ्ते के लिए लिख दो, this is what they said. And after they said, थोड़ा ज़्यादा हो गया. I said, what was wrong in this? So therefore, there is no constitutional bar. There is no judgment that effectively shields this act from any challenge. But the best possible position I am taking, or even Vishnu is taking, and which is on record is...
On the Kashi.
No, just on the act. Act को रहने दो. उससे कुछ नहीं होगा. Because the act speaks of the possibility of a survey to determine if a particular site is an archaeological site within the meaning of the Archaeological Act of 1958, which is it has to be 100 years or more. So the moment you establish within the meaning of that particular provision, section 4.3, that this is indeed a site which is more than 100 years, then the bar under the Act stops applying. That means you can say that reclamation is possible once you establish it's beyond 100 years.
So you bring the ASI first.
Correct. That's what has happened here. ASI का सर्वे कराइए, find out कि ये 100 साल है या उससे पुराना है, इसके नीचे क्या था, सब निकालिए.
Is the ASI equipped to go to the 40,000 sites to go and see it?
Well, if this country is serious about it, then it can ramp up.
Okay, so I have a couple of them. The Sambal Masjid in UP, where we saw violent protests.
Atala Jaunpur.
Then there's Gyanvapi Masjid in UP. There's Ajmer Sharif Dargah in Rajasthan. The Shahi Eidgah. Shamsi Jama Masjid. Tiliwali Masjid in UP. These are three in UP. Delhi's Quwwatul Islam Masjid. And then Kamal Maula Masjid in MP. Now, these are some of the major mosques where Hindu community says that it was built over destroyed temples.
Madhya Pradesh has several such sites, including sites dedicated to Devi Saraswati.
So sites bole to temples which have
Turned,
been
yes.
turned. So there are pillars or something where...
Clear inscriptions. I think there's a place called Dhar.
Yeah.
There are several such places.
So now these are the ones which are in court. Some of these are in court. Dhar maybe not in court.
It's not in court yet.
Yeah. So now the ones that I have listed out, these are in court.
Right.
What happens to these cases now? They just
As of now, until...
Tariq pe tariq pe tariq.
It's in principle, it's adjourned sine die. Because no effective orders can be passed.
So now unless in the Supreme Court somebody challenges it,
Correct.
the lower courts cannot pick it up.
Until I think a resolution of the Places of Worship Act challenge is decided one way or another, the stay seems like it might continue.
Okay. Will the two communities in the entire country, will they now sit silent after the Supreme Court verdict, or do you think that the Hindu community has been too charged now to let sleeping dogs lie? Maybe wrong metaphor I'm using.
I don't know what they will do. I can perhaps come...
Because there is no one organization picking it up. It's not as if the VHP, like they did with Babri Masjid and, So it's not one organization anywhere.
I'm happy with that.
You're happy with that?
Yes.
See,
the thing is, there are two sides to it. One, when somebody decides to be, let's say, a loose cannon. On that front, I have a problem with that person if they don't go properly prepared. It's a serious issue.
Because it sets a precedent.
Sets a precedent. Your dismissal or acceptance sets a precedent for the rest of us. So if you want to get into this battle, you want to join the fray, please come better prepared. Anybody jumps into this because they also want to be heard, then the rest of us will pay the price. Now, a centralized command structure also would mean that if a decision is taken that isse zyada hum challenge nahi karenge, that curtails the rights of the community, and nobody can speak on behalf of everyone. Because you see, some of these temples could be Kul Devtas and Kul Devis of a particular community. आप होते कौन है उनका मुंह बंद करने वाले? They have their specific rights under Articles 25 and 26 to say, this is our Kul Devta Mandir. It is more important to us than certain other big temples. Can you stop us? Why? Because I have a rin or a duty or an obligation to this particular temple. And that's how this entire concept goes on. We have actually an umbilical cord, a hereditary relationship with this temple. And if that temple stands occupied, what are we supposed to do? How can you ask them to say, नहीं आप चुप बैठ जाओ, ये तीन मिल गए ना, आप चुप बैठ जाओ? ये नहीं हो सकता है. If you recognize Hindu diversity, then you have to recognize the diversity of temples and voices. Otherwise, it's just let's say an ornamental phrase that you use in the interest of showing plurality within the Hindu community.
But there is a feeling that, this happened in the past. The desecration happened in the past. So shouldn't there be a time period that, okay, from 1800 onwards, from 1900 onwards?
Yes, we have the time period.
So
712 AD. Time period chahiye. Is this the first time I'm making this statement? No. Open my book, first book.
Yeah.
What would be the cutoff date to test what is decoloniality for Bharat? I specifically said it's not from the point when the Christian colonizer entered this country. I said it starts from the invasion of Sindh. I specifically said this. I knew this argument would come about, and therefore I gave the cutoff date in the book very clearly. It's not an afterthought. That we have suffered two different waves and two different, let's say, shades of colonization. and therefore we have to apply different yardsticks and standards. If South America has determined for itself what shall be the cutoff date, that is from the entry of the conquistadors in Latin America, we have a different yardstick for Bharat. So that recognition already stands. You want a cutoff date, we'll give you a cutoff date. See, somebody contributes money, builds a particular structure, good, no problem. You broke something and you built something, then the communities have an existing right, because Ram Janmabhoomi says, एक बार प्राण प्रतिष्ठा हो गया, एनर्जी वहां पे स्थापित हो चुका, उसका आवाहन हो चुका है, उसका कुछ नहीं किया जा सकता है until it has been deconsecrated. Desecration is not the same as deconsecration.
Explain.
Desecration is to khandify the murti.
Yeah.
Deconsecration is visarjan.
Oh, that so many temples have happened.
Exactly. Therefore, we are saying जब तक deconsecration नहीं हुआ है and पद्धति के हिसाब से वहां पे एनर्जी
Is there a word for deconsecration?
That
or
is
have
visarjan.
you just created?
No, I am saying desecration is to break and
Vandalize
defile.
it, break.
Deconsecration is to undo the process.
Huh.
So when you do prana pratishtha, you are inviting the energy to reside at that place. You can also ask it to go back. And this happens in every puja. In every yagna, in every homa, the purpose of, let's say, the purohit, there are 4 corners of the yagnapit. And there are different names for it. Basically what they do, the first process is sankalp karke avahan karna.
Huh.
But after the puja, thank you.
Yes.
That is the same thing that can happen with an image or a deity or let's say an idol, an icon so to speak, a murti.
Huh.
That has not happened. That is the basis for reclamation of Ram Janmabhoomi, saying even after the construction of the disputed structure, Prana Pratishtha remains valid.
But then pujas never used to happen, no, after...
That doesn't matter. Puja ho ya na ho, ek bar Prana Pratishtha ho gaya, it continues. This is once a deity's place, always a deity's place until it has been sent back through Paddhati. It has not happened. So पहले वहाँ पे मंदिर था, प्राण प्रतिष्ठा वहाँ पे किया गया था, वहाँ पे मूर्ति की स्थापना हुई थी. That's the end of the matter. This is specifically the position recognized in Ram Janmabhoomi. Why does the logic of that position change with respect to the other places?
Because it was considered a one-off thing.
Exactly. Therefore, it is the number is the problem here. I'm saying number should be a problem. If Ganga Jamni Tehzeeb kicks in according to if it exists, exchange kar lo.
Nahi hoga na. How many will
So
you
that
do?
means that Tehzeeb doesn't exist. It's a myth. If it's a myth, okay.
No, Ganga Jamna Tehzeeb is coexistence.
Right.
It doesn't mean you give yours and I give mine.
So
and
truth, honesty and reclamation have no place in this concept.
I guess not.
So it's almost as good as the Pakistani position saying Kargil में जितना जगह हमने ले लिया वो हमारा हो गया. And coexistence उसके बाद चलता रहेगा. And they will move and the next wave will take more place. यही चलता रहेगा.
But ये हुआ ना, Aksai Chin went away.
That's because
POK went away.
So therefore, that is because the so-called Indian state has chosen never to respond. We are being told this is a new Bharat. If it's a new Bharat, will it not revisit these concepts? Okay, simpler question. ठीक है भाई, in the context of 1992, you said ये हुआ, वो हुआ, ठीक है. अब तो legally हो रहा है. ASI के द्वारा survey हो रहा है. Even that you have a problem with. A perfectly constitutional method through a court of law, through a court-appointed commissioner with experts and through a specific provision that envisages, enables and permits this kind of a survey, that too is unconstitutional. So what are you saying? Give up. So that these monuments that have been built to glorify particular invasion and domination continue. I don't care for the political aspect of it. I genuinely don't care for the political aspect of it or the cultural aspect of it. I am on fundamental questions of theology. Why should one person who has built a certain place with his asta give it up? On what anvils? And for who? What is this audience that we are expected to cater to?
Gave it up. No, give it up kahan pe? It happened.
Where kahan pe?
Hundreds of years ago, right?
Right. Okay. Gave it up in the sense, तलवार लेके आपके सामने कोई खड़ा हो गया. Therefore he is saying that maro ya bhago. And therefore that translates to what? Relinquishment? No, it does not. It certainly does not. How many examples of other, let's say, sites do you want where there were continued waves of resistance, just as Ram Janmabhoomi? The problem with the understanding of the Ram Janmabhoomi case is that we think of it as an exceptional situation where that is perhaps the only site for which there was constant resistance and let's say defiance. No, that's not the case. Kashi bhi to kya hai? So who am I actually representing? I am representing the royal family which is reclaiming the Razia mosque because that was the original place according to them. And who is Razia? The same Razia that Justice Nariman actually extolled in a speech saying Razia Sultana was a feminist ruler, Bharat has produced all of this. It's the same person. There are records to this effect. So I think instead of dropping, let's say, numbers as a bogey, let's speak facts and solutions. Solutions hai. There's a clear methodology that the Supreme Court has shown through its Ayodhya judgment. You don't want even that. Then I think there's a serious problem where on the one hand, the Places of Worship Act will not allow us to reclaim. Then state control of Hindu temples will deprive us of autonomy. And the Waqf Act effectively enables expansionism. What are we exactly enabling as a constitutional
So these two
secularism?
can't coexist?
They, according to me, are three uncomfortable cohabitants. One cannot exist as long as the other does. And if all three exist, they come at the detriment and to the peril
Of society.
the civilization, Sanskriti, Bharatiya society.
Okay, now this a noted historian, Richard Eaton, who's written several books. He says that it's not just these dozen odd mosques in UP and Madhya Pradesh and all. There are at least 80 instances. He says 80 instances of mosques in India where evidence of prior temple desecration is fairly certain.
Okay.
This is what he says. Now, there are many, there's a lot of literature available.
Correct.
And everybody will have a different number. And there's Sitaram Goel, this
Naranchori,
historian.
Hindu temples,
Yeah.
what happened to them, volume 1, 2.
So he says, correct.
They said 2,000 temples and that's the tip of the iceberg.
And 1,000 temples, I
2,000.
think. 2,000?
And all these temples, Atala,
2,000.
Jaunpur and everything, they have been specifically mentioned in the opening chapter by Arun Shori.
Okay, let's finish with Goel and then you tell me with Arun Shori. He says, Mahmud of Ghazni robbed and burnt down 1,000 temples at Mathura, 10,000 in and around Kannauj. One of his successors, Ibrahim, demolished 1,000 temples each in Hindustan, which is the Ganga, Yamuna, Doab and Malwa. Muhammad Ghori destroyed another 1,000 at Varanasi. Kutubuddin Aibak employed elephants for pulling down 1,000 temples in Delhi. Ali Adil Shah of Bijapur destroyed 200 to 300 temples in Karnataka. A Sufi Qayyam Shah destroyed 12 temples in Tiruchirappalli. Now, some of them, obviously, let's presume even 50% of them
It's true.
remained destroyed. The others couldn't be destroyed because they were it was made of stone.
Correct.
So they couldn't be destroyed. So uske upar mosque banaya.
Have you been to Jagannath Puri?
Yes.
Have you seen the broken idols?
Yes.
The marks of sword?
Yeah.
Even that was
I've
not
been
spared.
till Ayutthaya to see in Thailand the destroyed temples. So, I mean, I've seen that was by a different thing. But what I'm trying to say is you've seen destroyed temples, you've seen Buddhist temples come up on them, you've seen, mosques come up on them. अब उसको क्या करोगे आप? उसको अब वो मॉस्क तोड़ के उसको टेम्पल को रीबिल्ड करोगे, कितने रीबिल्ड करोगे?
जितने हो सके. Okay, so let's flip the question and ask a slightly different question. What is the acceptable number for the other side?
I don't know. You tell me.
Zero.
None. Yeah.
0. Because when one was being contested, that was not acceptable. So we are being told 0 is the acceptable number.
Yeah.
So that means even Kashi and Mathura we give up.
But it's not zero of just the other side. There is a whole bunch of people in this country.
He knows.
Millions.
Hindus in name only.
What?
Because they are being told. Because we are being told by these geniuses.
What? He knows.
He knows. Hindus in name only.
This is really unfair,
Why?
know. It could be Hindus who don't want any more bloodshed. Hindus who don't want any more...
Why do they expect bloodshed? Who are they expecting it from? Why don't they answer that question?
Because when somebody makes a claim कि इसको तोड़ो फिर से
तो
बनाओ.
अब जवाब दो भाई कोर्ट में हमें मतलब you prove us wrong in court, evidence for evidence, evidence के जवाब में तलवार क्यों उठ रहा है भाई यहाँ पे? Prove us wrong, defeat us in court, then the Hail Mary pass comes in. मतलब पूरा institution सारा मतलब this and that.
हाँ.
That is what we are being told.
So this
This is नाच न जाने आंगन टेढ़ा.
So you can't say that Dushyant Dave is Nach Na Jane Angan
I am
Teda,
not
such
taking any names.
Okay, I am taking, no.
Then you take the responsibility.
I am taking name. He's saying that the judiciary in India, and I'm quoting, I'm not saying I am saying it. He's called it a majoritarian judiciary.
So
and he says,
when the electoral bond judgment was given, तब क्या हो रहा था?
Then.
So many verdicts which have gone against the government. See, let's look at this. I don't hold brief for the government and nor do I wish to. The government will defend itself. My point is very simple. community's interest, community's rights, can they be pegged within the four corners of the constitution, period. And I am saying, prove the so-called majoritarian conspiracy and historical revisionism by coming to court. आपके जो witnesses हैं, either they are unreliable during राम जन्मभूमि, या आधे तो भाग ही जाते हैं, पलायन करने में मतलब नंबर 1 है. Articles लिखना जानते हैं. And they know how to hold forth on, let's say, comfortable platforms before, let's say, sympathetic audiences. But when it comes to actually proving their point before a court of law on the anvils of evidence, even that you didn't have the, let's say, the ability to do.
Justice Nariman, he called it mockery of justice on what happened. Why didn't he come to court at that point of time? Why didn't he say anything? Why are these people saying it after Justice Chandrachud has demitted office?
See, I think it's very unfair when members of a particular institution basically say that this institution has gone downhill after my exit. That I think is too much of a statement to make. And two, some of his statements, both on history and especially contentious aspects of history and his specific, let's say, points on the Ram Janmabhoomi case, are as inaccurate and incorrect as they can get. To say that there was no finding whatsoever from the Supreme Court on the existence of a temple underneath the disputed structure, call it only the disputed structure and nothing else, is false. It's provably, demonstrably and patently false. Read the judgment. Read the Allahabad High Court judgment. Read the addendum to the judgment of the Supreme Court, and you will see that there are instances where they say Guru Nanak visits the site once, मंदिर था. Guru Nanak बाद में आते हैं, मंदिर नहीं था. Okay, तो बीच में क्या आया? जलजला. हुआ क्या भाई वहां पे? And there are corroborating records. And you're telling me that a general pattern of behavior that has been witnessed across the subcontinent and across the world, you're telling me suddenly did not happen here. So we are not the playground for expansionist ideologies. We are only asking for what belongs to us through a court of law. What is unreasonable about this position? You can write articles, use your historians to, let's say, pixelate portions of this country's history, brainwash people, generations of people. And when called to court to say, इतना ही मतलब हमारा जो position इतना बेतुका है, तो आके prove तो कर दो भाई तुम court में. ना, that you will not do.
But in all these, now what he's saying is, Justice Nariman said that the court Supreme Court stopped short at identifying the mandir. Did it stop?
The Supreme Court stopped short of identifying who was responsible for destruction of the temple. It never stopped short of identifying the existence of a temple underneath the structure, because there's a very clear discussion of the pillars that were actually unearthed. Do you know the kind of resistance that was given before the Allahabad High Court when the High Court, I think in 89, or I don't know exactly when, ordered excavation? ASI's excavation was being resisted by the other side, and there's a judgment exclusively on why that particular operation or that particular exercise needs to be undertaken. Why do you not want stuff to be unearthed? ऐसा क्या डर है भाई? आपके हिसाब से तो कुछ नहीं हुआ था. The Dhara of Ganga Jamni Tehzeeb was flowing everywhere.
कहाँ आप unearth करोगे ना? लोगों के घर बन गए हैं अब. Everybody is now terrified that oh my God, they'll come any day to my house.
Allow me to say this.
हाँ.
काशी में करो, मथुरा में करो, शक्तिपीठ ज्योतिर्लिंग जो भी हैं and जो जिनका पुराणों में रेफरेंस है उसमें करो. We are not saying हर गली की मंदिर में करो. At least major sites, yeah.
Sambhal is now a major site.
It was a major site. Dhar is a major site. All those sites which find some scriptural reference through the Puranas or through a Sthal Puran, at least uska to karo. Because they will have identified communities who have a direct relationship with that particular institution. We don't need to start with a number of 40,000. At the same time, we can't start with a ridiculous number of 0.
But what if the Muslim community turns around and say कि तुमने यहाँ पे रेल भवन बनाया, रेल भवन के नीचे हमारा मदरसा हुआ करता था. ये
देखिए उसके नीचे क्या हुआ करता था ये भी देख लेते हैं. That's the point about the Waqf claim. So here's the point. Your claims, they rest on the strength of your claims, not on evidence. And the owners, unfortunately, in that context, turns on the party which wants to resist that particular claim. You now prove why it doesn't belong to you. Whereas here, when we are willing to prove that it belongs to us, we are being stopped from actually doing that through a process of evidence in court. How does this work, yeah? So on the one hand, there's a legislation that gives you a free pass. And there's another hand, there's a legislation that prevents me from presenting evidence. Tell me, how does this fall within the four corners of acceptable constitutional morality?
Who's going to pick this up now? I mean, you said you don't want to get into the politics of it and you don't want to get into political parties. But like I said before, the VHP had picked up the case of the Babri Masjid. Who's going to pick it up if it's going to be random people fighting?
I genuinely can't
cases?
answer the question. I will do whatever I can in my limited capacity. Vishnu is doing a stellar, fantastic job. I'd like to use this platform to recognize the scintillating work that he's done in the
Vishnu
service
Jain.
of the civilization. Yes, Vishnu Shankar Jain and his father Sri Hari Shankar Jain. Brilliant work, must be recognized and must be supported by all those who want reclamation of the civilization. And I think we need more such people. I'll use this platform to also make a confession, because there's a lot of myth that goes around about me. I am not doing this full time. I do this less than 20% of my time, because my professional time is dedicated towards, let's say, my livelihood. Vishnu has been doing this almost full time. So I'm using this opportunity to clarify a few things, to show that he has actually done more on this particular front. I can say I've written a book, I've done all of this. He has done a few things. I have taken up specific issues. I will target only those issues where I think I can lend a certain degree of, let's say, representation, and which I think I can accommodate and which can coexist alongside my professional commitments.
So we spoke about Sanatana in the last podcast that I recorded with you. You've watched the incidents which are happening in Bangladesh, the targeting of the Hindu community and the Buddhists too, the vandalizing of temples, and I don't want to go into the details, but you're watching all this. There's one section which feels that it's upon the Hindu community in India to stand by them, to do something. But what can you do actually? You can't do anything. You can raise their voice in the sense in the international community, you can pick it up. So that like in 1971 when the world didn't care at all, nobody bothered about the Hindu community being killed, raped, their temples being destroyed. At least now the world knows something is happening. That's the only thing we can do. What else can we do?
We thought once the world is apprised of the situation, it will result in action. We stand proven wrong. So it's not about knowledge. It's about the aesthetics of the victim. Hindus don't make for great aesthetic victims.
Aesthetic victims?
Yes, it's not a politically correct cause to support. So you will find Richard Gere supporting Tibetans. How many such people in Hollywood will support the cause of Hindus who are actually being butchered right now?
Not even Hindus.
Exactly.
I haven't heard Sundar Pichai or any
None
of them speaking.
There is a concept of aesthetics of victimhood. Palestinians make for great victims for some sections of the people. We don't. My suggestion is this. You started off by saying, what can Hindus do? Let's turn the question around through a different tone. What can we do? What we lack is non-state international Hindu organizations with the necessary networks and the pull and the pockets to get the job done in the event state actors fail. Or they are, let's say, they're crippled by certain circumstances or considerations. The state of Israel was created through such non-state actors and organizations. They created a state. And they were never more than Hindus in terms of numbers and demographics. Never. By the most conservative estimates, we are anywhere between 800 million to 1 billion across the world. By the most liberal estimates, they are not more than 1.5, let's say they're about 15 million at best. That's 1.5 crores. What is that population compared to Bharat? They get the job done for their community. They resist, notwithstanding the propaganda and the vitriol that's spewed against them from the 7th of October 2023. They've been doing it. Why can't we? Because this community needs to realize the value of non-state self-reliance, because assuming that there is a change of situation, your priorities still exist, your survival issues still exist, the existential challenges that stare at you still exist. You still need to have a response mechanism. I've said this before, that perhaps what you need is a hard-nosed World Hindu Congress of organizations and, let's say, individuals who can congregate at a certain place, discuss deliverables, and act on those deliverables as opposed to constantly becoming event organizing platforms. Let's assume that I get called or somebody gets called, we'll get more visibility, यहाँ पे 2-3 pictures हो जाएंगे, then Insta पे थोड़े likes हो जाएंगे, ये सब होगा, मेरी book की और बिक्री बढ़ी, ये सब चलता रहेगा. Has it had a tangible impact on minds? Yes, to some extent. I will not say no to it, I will not underplay it. But is it helping a person who's being butchered? At the end of the day, वही तो test है, वही तो metric है. The sheer futility and uselessness of what I have done became stark when I got messages from the relatives of people suffering there and the people themselves on a repeated basis daily throughout this entire period. Saying, kuch kijiye, kahin to kuch bataiye. For some reason, they labor under the delusion that I have access to higher powers and higher wisdom. I said, mujhe nahi pata. I have no access to anyone. All I can do is air this concern through my platforms. If it gets heard, sure. But ऐसा नहीं है कि मेरे बताए बगैर उनको पता नहीं है. They have access to better sources.
Yes.
तो उसके बावजूद क्या हो रहा है? I can only say, Bharat needs to truly secure this neighborhood and ensure that this neighborhood becomes a safe one for its core identity, which is Sanatana Dharma. You don't need to beat around the bush by calling it civilizational identity. और क्या है? Sanatana Dharma यही है. China has operated with that particular vision in mind, where the core Chinese heartland or mainland has been protected through creation of multiple buffer regions through annexation. That's what they've done over the years. Outer Mongolia, Inner Mongolia, this and that, and Tibetan Plateau. And China was never meant to be our neighbor. Tibet was meant to be our neighbor, and Tibet and China were constantly fighting. We were having wars with Tibet. Zorawar Singh actually claimed Ladakh. So considering that is how a civilizational state operates. We may disagree with the Chinese style of working. Maybe it doesn't work for us. Democracy works for us better. But you have to ask yourself, what is your priority? Long-term security. Long-term civilizational security. It is not an abstract concept which is the pet peeve of the wine-tasting elites of Latins. It has a real consequence, because when demographics change, you lose territory, cession of culture, then you realize they're outside your gated communities.
So people in the gated community say, हमने थोड़ी ना ठेका ले रखा है. If Hindus get attacked in Canada, if Hindus get attacked in San Francisco, if Hindu children are under threat in universities, in Ivy League colleges, if Hindus of Bangladesh, हमने कौन सा ठेका ले रखा है of looking after their welfare?
And which is why I use the word heroes at the outset. कम्युनिटी आइडेंटिटी और कम्युनिटी का वैल्यू आपको तब तक नहीं पता चलेगा जब तक ये प्रॉब्लम जो है आपके घर के बाहर खड़ा नहीं हो जाता है. तब समझ में आएगा. ये जितने भी आपके भाड़े के सिक्योरिटी गार्ड से भाग जाएंगे. Secular state will have its secular considerations when it comes to protection of Hindus. And usually it's not in our favor. Then you'll realize, अच्छा तो हमारे लिए खड़ा होने वाला बचाने वाला तो कोई यहाँ पे रहा ही नहीं.
Why are you saying secular, it's not in our favor? Why?
Because by and large, if the perpetrator happens to be a non-Hindu, there are considerations that go into the decision-making process, even if it is restoration of law and order. If the perpetrator happens to be a Hindu or an alleged Hindu, they suddenly find their masculinity. Yes. How many instances of this do you want across the history of independent India, not Bharat? So, those who think like that, Mubarak ho bhai. Your myopia will come back to haunt you at some point.
It hasn't.
Well, if it hasn't, I might as well bat for those who realize the value of it. I don't bat for those who don't understand the value of it. I don't claim to be the sole voice or whatever it is. But if at all there is a cross-section of the community which deserves compassion, help, it is this segment.
The expats who, the first generation, second generation now out there, they say that the umbilical link is broken because what happens is that now they are facing the backlash because they're doing very well, right? Now they're facing the backlash and they're saying that now we are viewed with the same level. When we try to form a unified grouping, the caste factor, the race factor, all that comes in. Hindu या Sikh है कि क्या है, Indian caste में देखा जाता है. So you have the Andhra grouping, then you have a Telangana grouping,
Agreed.
then you have in that the caste grouping, the OBC grouping, and now the Americans are waking up to the whole caste factor in this.
So, when I spoke of decoloniality, there were a bunch of geniuses on social media who said, यार कितना मतलब academic concept है. And I said, भैया जब तक तुम decoloniality की बात नहीं करोगे या mental decolonization की बात नहीं करोगे, जितने भी stereotypes भारतीय आइडेंटिटी और हिंदू आइडेंटिटी के खिलाफ इस colonial laboratory में इन लोगों ने इसका इजाद किया, उसका इस्तेमाल हर जगह पे होगा. And now we are seeing it. The discussion of an alleged breast tax, this tax, and Molakaram and all that, they talk about it. So history is being weaponized against your present and your future. So the job, it's at 3 levels. Address that historical, let's say, brainwashing or pixelation or the way they've fabricated it. Address that at one level. Then you need to have a societal, let's say, outreach as well, where each of these groups realize, अकेले तो हमें से कोई अकेला खड़ा नहीं हो पाएगा. We won't survive. You have to realize that. Learn to work with each other, collaborate with each other, put your individual egos aside. 3, there needs to be a political response, which means you need to start cultivating people in your respective jurisdictions who can bat for you. America passes of corruption as lobbying, karo, no problem. Wherever you have to wet the beak or dip the beak or whatever, karte beto, but make sure that the job is done. Then you also make sure that the mothership is constantly there to help you. So it's a two-way street, which means India will need to actively invest in the diaspora, be unabashed about its civilizational identity. You don't need to discriminate against, let's say, minorities. But you need to be clear about, भाई ये है तो भारत है वरना भारत नहीं है, बात खत्म. What is that identity whose absence will take away the identity of Bharat is the simple question. Whatever that identity may be.
Repeat.
What is that identity whose absence will finish the existence of Bharat as Bharat? If the answer is not obvious there, then I think we are deluding ourselves into secular stupidity.
Namaste, Jai Hind. You're watching ANI podcast with Smita Prakash.
अगर हम उसको मस्जिद कहेंगे तो फिर विवाद होगा.
The issue is टूटा है क्या भारत?
400 पार का मतलब ये है कि संविधान खतरे में है.
क्या हम लोग ये निर्देश देते हैं कि फला को गिरफ्तार करके जेल डाल दें?
वही तो कह रहे हैं सब.
ये बेबुनियाद निराधार आरोप.
सच्चा सुनना चाहो देखो स्मिता प्रकाश ANI. It does not lie.